Hi there, it's Christy with the Chirp YouTube channel. Today we are continuing on our sensory supports for home saga. This week I'll be talking about time awareness. Now in this episode, I'm not talking about actually telling time. We're talking about the awareness of time passing. A lot of kids, a lot of people have difficulty internally noticing that time is passing. And so time tends to pass them by in large chunks without them noticing. Or they notice that time is passing, but it's passing much slower than it would for someone else. It doesn't seem to be a very intuitive process for them. This happens in children who get some sort of a diagnosis, such as autism or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or just attention deficit disorder. And even without a diagnosis, it can be a problem for lots of people. You probably know those people who will sit on your couch for 4 hours and not leave because it doesn't feel to them like 4 hours has passed. Or maybe you have a child who can sit at the breakfast table and eat breakfast for an hour and miss the bus to go to school because he lost track of time passing. It didn't feel as if time was passing to him. These are problems for being able to function well in life, for being able to have good social relationships, for being able to hold down a job, finish school. All of those kind of things require the ability to manage time wisely. One of the first things I want to recommend is a visual timer. You might choose the Time Timer brand. You might choose a simple Pi timer that you can find on Amazon. I'll put links to those down below, and I've put pictures up here so that you can see what I'm talking about. The deal behind these specialty timers is that it's very visual how much time is passing. They're usually round, and they have a red part that starts out usually at an hour, and then as the hour ticks down, the red part gets a little smaller. So this is the white part seeping through. Then when the red part is like this, it's half an hour left. And then the red part starts ticking this way. I can't do that with my hands, but hopefully you get the idea. The pie, that is the red, gets smaller the more time is left. So if this much time is left, there's more time than if this much time is left. Red is, of course, a color of alertness, so it makes sense that it would be red. This can be really helpful for kids who have difficulty staying on track. You can set the timer for 5 minutes, which looks about like this, and say, when the timer beeps, you have to be done getting dressed. This eliminates the dithering that often comes with completing a task for kids who have difficulty managing their attention. And the child only has to manage attention for this long and then moves on to the next task. If your child has difficulty finishing breakfast, set the timer for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and say, you got to watch the timer. As it gets less and less, you need to be finishing up your last few bites of cereal. You need to put it away in the sink, in the dishwasher, and get your backpack, because that's the next step. For a while, you're going to need to still prompt the child by setting the timer for each task that needs to be done. As the child gets more proficient at this and more independent, you can write a little list. Getting dressed, 5 minutes. Eating breakfast, 15 minutes. Brushing teeth, 5 minutes. You can make a little list of all the activities that the child needs to do. This is just an example of what might happen in a morning routine, but you can do this in the classroom if you're a teacher. You can do this for other activities at home also. And then the child graduates to being able to set the timer himself. So for example, he gets up in the morning, he has 5 minutes to get dressed, and then he has 15 minutes to eat his breakfast, and then he has 5 minutes to brush his teeth. That enables the child to be self-monitoring better. And you probably still have to keep track of it. Of course, you have to keep on top of if the child is sort of staying on task, because you don't want to be driving him to school every morning or whatever the case may be. We want our kids to be independent, but they don't get there automatically without any support from us. That's our job as the adults. We have to train them and help them and prompt them, but back off, allowing them to use other tools as they can so that when we're not around, the child can still use that timer and be successful. Setting timers on watches is also a good idea. They're not quite as meaningful because you can't just continually look at them and monitor the countdown. But if you're a person who has difficulty noticing that time is passing by, perhaps you want to set the every hour alarm on your watch to vibrate or just to do a little beep so that you are aware of time passing. And maybe you make a little mantra that you say at the top of every hour. Maybe you say a prayer, maybe you just sit, close your eyes and take some deep breaths. That can really help with getting used to how long a particular time period is. Some sort of prayer or meditation practice can also be helpful in this regard. You might start out with 5 minutes and just sit very still. Think of a Bible verse, a few words of worship. Think of a simple mantra that you create yourself, or just pay attention to how your body feels that particular day. Set your timer for 5 minutes to start with and sit in those minutes, feeling the time pass, listening to yourself breathe, feeling how your body feels, pay attention to your different body parts. However you choose to spend that 5 minutes, realize what 5 minutes feels like and focus on your experience during that time or on one of these mantras that you have chosen or one of these prayers or Bible verses. You are during that time teaching your body this is what 5 minutes feels like. And then you can increase that time and train your body what 10 minutes feels like. You can do this for your children too in various different creative ways. Set the timer for 5 minutes and say, we are going to play in the sand for 5 minutes. This is what 5 minutes looks like. Let's get used to what 5 minutes feels like. Teaching this sensory experience of how the body feels as it passes through time is something we have to talk about. We can't just tell kids about it. We can't just provide them with 5 minutes of time passing, not say anything about it, and expect that it will be meaningful to them going forward. We need to talk a lot about it. We need to talk about how it feels to sit for 5 minutes, how it feels to stand for 5 minutes, how it feels to play in the sand for 5 minutes. Sometimes it feels shorter, like when we're having a really good time. And sometimes it's really hard because I don't want to sit on the couch for 5 minutes. We need to talk about how the sun goes up at a certain time of the day and the sun goes down at a certain time of the day. And it's usually a little bit later each day for a while, and then it's a little bit earlier each day for a while. And we can sort of tell what time of day it is by sort of looking outside and discovering how bright it is, or assuming you don't live in a terribly cloudy environment, you can kind of tell what time of day it is. And we can pay attention to that and say, oh, mom comes home from work when the sun rays are coming in the back window. So if the sun rays are still coming in through the front windows, then it's still morning time. It's not evening yet, and mom comes home in the evening. Talk about these things. Make as many observations as you can and wrangle your children into interesting conversations about time passing as much as possible. We also want to practice turn taking using timers whenever we can, because this is another way of teaching a social emotional skill, which is turn taking, and also practicing how time feels when we are waiting, which is difficult. For example, I have a swing in my classroom, and if there is more than one child who wants to ride the swing at the same time, I will set the timer for 3 minutes, and I will say, Jada is riding the swing right now. In 3 minutes, it will be Pierce's turn. And then when the timer goes off, Jada has to get out and Pierce can get in. It's very efficient, it's very effective because kids can express that they want something and they also can't have it right at the same time. So it teaches a good number of skills all at the same time. It's pretty magical. Resources that I would recommend for teaching the awareness of time passing would be pie timers, time timers, something that is round with that decreasing red bit that I mentioned and that I showed you pictures of. I recommend egg timers, which are those little guys with the sand running through usually. Any sort of timer that is going to be especially helpful, interesting, and visual for our kids. Have clocks around, have both digital clocks and analog clocks, just to demonstrate that there are lots of different ways of watching the time pass. Watch those things. Watch the digital clock go from 11:46 to 11:47, and watch the analog clock slowly tick 1 minute away. Feel how that feels and talk about how that was 1 minute. 1 minute. What do you think we could do in 1 minute? It's also a good idea to use timers for things that the child does not want to do. I mentioned that you can use the timer for waiting, for when the child needs to take turns at an activity with someone else. It's also a really good idea to use timers when the child needs to do something unpleasant. Set the timer for 2 minutes of electric toothbrush. Usually electric toothbrushes come with their own little beeps, at least mine does, but you might find a 2-minute long song that the kid loves to sing and play that during that 2 minutes and say, we can make 2 minutes much more fun. You could create a 2-minute dance that lasts exactly 2 minutes, and you can do it and make your kid laugh while he is brushing his teeth. If a child needs to clean something up, set the timer for 5 minutes and say, 5 minutes is almost nothing. Look, it's only this much. We're just going to pick up for 5 minutes and then we can go play some more. It really helps for the child to realize it's not that bad and I can do almost anything for 5 minutes. Also, if you need your child to be finished with something and the child doesn't want to, it's always a great idea to use a timer that has a loud beep. In my classroom, I tell the kids when free play is coming to an end, I tell them, free play is almost finished, then we're gonna have story time, 3 minutes. Story time in 3 minutes. We've really decreased any sort of meltdowns during that transition because we're warning them regularly. And then I remind them at 2 minutes, story time in 2 minutes, story time in 1 minute. And no one is surprised when the timer goes off because I have warned them in advance numerous times. And they expect it. And so then we clean up and we have story time and it's not as big of a deal. It's a great idea to do these things with a timer because then you can blame the timer and you don't blame the mom, the dad, the teacher. You blame that dumb timer that ran out of time on the timer. But mom, dad, and teacher are fine. They didn't cause this problem. Of course, you did cause this problem, but you're doing it in a smart way. You are teaching great skills using a timer, and you're being a great parent or a great teacher because you're teaching kids that sometimes we don't get what we want right away. Sometimes we have to do hard stuff, and it's okay. They will survive. I'm sure you can think of lots more creative ways to teach the feeling of time passing, to talk about the feeling of time passing with your kids or with your students. And I hope that this video was a catalyst to get some of those ideas flowing and getting used in your home or your classroom. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget, if you're not subscribed, click on that subscribe button. I would love it if you gave me a thumbs up and if also you clicked the notification bell. I find out that I put out a lot of videos and people don't know that they're there because they haven't clicked that little notification bell. What will happen if you do that is that you'll get a reminder on your phone when I post a new video. And of course, I believe that these videos are helpful to you if you have kids who have different developmental needs of any kind, or if you're a teacher or a professional or a volunteer or anything like that. because you can use these practical suggestions in your everyday life. And they're not only good for kids who have special needs, but for all kids. We can all afford to be better at supporting the kids in our lives. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.